Kiera Ashford had just finished her morning chores when the sky split open with the deafening roar of rotor blades, and a helicopter came out of nowhere, landing right in the middle of her family's hayfield. "What the?" she muttered, shielding her eyes from the wind as loose straw whipped around her. The helicopter touched down like it owned the place, sleek, silver, and definitely expensive. Kiera stormed down the dirt path from the barn, boots crunching against the dry earth. Her chest was tight with irritation. The hayfield wasn't some landing strip for rich show-offs. It was her family's livelihood. The door of the helicopter slid open, and a man stepped out like he'd just walked off the cover of a fashion magazine. Tall, sharp-dressed in a black button-up and tailored pants, black sunglasses still on as if he couldn't be bothered to notice the chaos he'd just caused, that set her off. "Hey," Kiera shouted, waving her arms as she approached. "You can't just land that thing here. This is private property." The man turned, clearly not expecting to be yelled at. He pulled off his sunglasses, blinking against the sun. His eyes were a piercing steel gray, his jaw strong enough to cut glass. "Are you the owner?" he asked, stepping toward her with a calm that only made her angrier. "I manage this land for my dad. You crushed half a row of hay. Who even are you?" He extended a hand like this was a casual meet and greet. "Iver Vaughn." She ignored his hand. "Okay, Iver Vaughn, this isn't some luxury resort with a helipad. This is a working farm. I wasn't planning to stay long, just needed to make a quick stop. Emergency." Kiera crossed her arms. "What kind of emergency brings a guy in a designer shirt to the middle of nowhere?" He tilted his head, clearly debating how much to say. "Business. I'm looking at a nearby property. My pilot had to reroute due to wind. This was the safest spot to land." Kiera narrowed her eyes. "You expect me to believe that? Believe what you want. I'll pay for the damage." She laughed, once sharp and humorless. "It's not about the money, it's about respect." His eyes flickered with something, curiosity, amusement. "I respect people who tell me their name before yelling at me. Kiera Ashford." "Nice to meet you, Kiera," he said, like this was all perfectly normal. It wasn't. She turned on her heel and stomped back toward the barn, fuming. 10 minutes later, he was still standing there outside the helicopter, and she was still annoyed. Her dad was in town, and her younger brother wasn't due back until evening. She was the only one around to deal with this arrogant stranger. Kiera grabbed the hose from the side of the barn, intending to rinse off the mud on her boots. Iver followed, hands in his pockets, studying the field like it was a painting. "You've got good land here," he said. "Flat, fertile." She turned the hose on with a hard twist. "Glad you approve." He didn't leave. Instead, he pointed at the barn. "That yours too?" "Yeah, you run it?" "Yup." He studied her for a second. "Impressive." That caught her off guard. "You say that like you didn't expect me to." "Most people in my world don't do things with their hands anymore." She looked him over. "Clearly." There was a beat of silence. Then, out of nowhere, he said, "Want to see the inside of the helicopter?" She blinked. "What? It's not every day someone lands one in your field. Might as well take a look." She hesitated. Then, curiosity winning, she dropped the hose and walked toward the chopper. Inside, it was like stepping into a luxury car that could fly. Cream leather seats, a built-in minibar. Everything gleamed. "You live like this?" she asked, sitting down cautiously. "Sometimes," he said, sliding into the seat across from her. "I travel a lot." "What do you do?" He shrugged. "I run a few companies, investments, real estate." "Energy?" That explained the watch on his wrist that probably cost more than her truck. "You're a millionaire, aren't you?" she asked. "Guilty." She raised an eyebrow. "How guilty?" He grinned. "Let's just say this helicopter was a gift to myself." Kiera snorted. "Figures?" But the way he looked at her, then like she was a puzzle he couldn't quite figure out, made her stomach twist. He stayed for over an hour. When his pilot came back from refueling, Iver didn't rush to leave. Instead, he asked more questions about the farm, her life, things that had nothing to do with him. And somehow she found herself answering. He finally stood, brushing off his pants. "I'll have someone call you about the hay." "I'll make it right." "You don't have to. I want to." She didn't know what to say to that, so she nodded. As he stepped into the helicopter, he paused. "You ever come to the city?" She raised an eyebrow. "Why?" He smiled. "Because if you do, I owe you dinner." The rotors started up again. Kiera stepped back as the wind picked up, watching the helicopter rise into the sky. She stood there long after it disappeared into the clouds, her heart pounding for reasons she didn't understand. All she knew was that Iver Vaughn had landed in her field like a storm, and something in her life had shifted. 2 weeks passed. The memory of the helicopter had nearly faded into the rhythm of Kiera's daily life, until her brother, Dean, burst into the kitchen carrying a bulky envelope and wearing a look of disbelief. "Kiera," he said, dropping it on the table. "Did you meet someone named Iver Vaughn?" She paused mid-slice, the apple in her hand forgotten. "Why?" "Because this just showed up, certified mail, addressed to you, from some Vaughn Enterprises in New York." She wiped her hands on a dish towel and took the envelope. The paper was thick, the kind that said it had never seen the inside of a grocery store. Inside was a letter folded around a crisp certificate. The letter was handwritten. "Kiera, I meant what I said about making it right. I've included a formal compensation market value plus a little extra for your time and patience. If you're ever in the city, come see what I actually do. I think you'll find it enlightening." Iver, she unfolded the certificate. It wasn't a check. It was a voucher for a round-trip private flight to Manhattan, valid any time, no expiration. Dean leaned over her shoulder. "Are you gonna go?" Kiera stared at the gold-embossed paper. "I don't know. You should," he said. "You've never left the state." "Might be good for you." She folded the letter, heart thumping faster than it should have. "We'll see." But that night, as she lay awake listening to the cicadas, she couldn't shake the image of Iver's eyes. Calm, unreadable, and yet aware of her in a way most people weren't. The next morning, she called the number printed at the bottom of the voucher. 3 days later, she stepped onto a private jet that smelled faintly of citrus and leather, trying not to let her nerves show. The pilot greeted her by name and offered her a glass of something sparkling. She declined, clutching her bag like it was armor. As the plane lifted into the sky, she stared out the window, watching her familiar world grow smaller and smaller. When she landed, a black car waited on the tarmac. A driver opened the door and nodded politely. "Miss Ashford?" The city was nothing like she'd imagined. It pulsed with urgency, every corner alive with noise and motion. Glass towers gleamed in the sun, and people moved like they were all late to something important. The car pulled up to a building that looked more like a museum than an office. All angles and glass, with a waterfall wall cascading just inside the lobby. She stepped out, heart pounding, and followed the driver through the entrance. The elevator shot up 50 floors without a sound. When the doors slid open, she was greeted by silence and marble. And then he appeared, no sunglasses this time, no wind or dust or open fields. Just Iver Vaughn in a slate gray suit, buttoned precisely with a tie that probably cost more than her groceries for a month. He looked sharper somehow. More contained, but when his eyes landed on hers, the corner of his mouth lifted. "You came." Kiera adjusted the strap of her bag. "Apparently, you want the tour or the truth," she blinked. "That's an odd question." He walked across the room, gesturing for her to follow. "The tour is the polished version. The truth is messier." She raised an eyebrow. "Then I'll take the truth." They stepped into his office, which was more like a gallery. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, and a sculpture made of twisted metal hung in the corner. He gestured to a chair. She sat. "I started with nothing," he said, leaning back against his desk. "My mother cleaned houses. My father left before I turned 5. I got lucky with a mentor who taught me how to read people and balance risk. I built my first company by 25. Bought my 5th by 30. Kiera listened, unsure where this was going, but the more I built, the less real everything felt, until I landed in that field." She frowned. "You're not saying I'm your wake-up call." "No," he said. "I'm saying you didn't flinch." "And I needed that." She crossed her arms. "Most people don't land helicopters on strangers' property." He gave a quiet laugh. "True." There was a pause, thick with something unsaid. Finally, Kiera asked, "Why bring me here?" He met her gaze. "I didn't expect to think about you after I left." "But I did, every day." She looked away, unsure what to do with that. "I don't want anything from you," he added. "No strings, I just wanted to see you again." Kiera stood, needing space. She moved toward the window, staring out at the endless skyline. "You live in a world that doesn't make sense to me, I know. And I'm not some prize you get for doing the right thing." "I know that too," she turned. "Then what do you want?" He didn't hesitate. "Time, just time with you." She studied him, every part of her on high alert. "This isn't a fairy tale." "No," he said, "but it doesn't have to be a transaction either." Kiera looked at the skyline again. "I don't belong here, I'm not asking you to, I just want dinner." She paused. "One dinner." His voice softened. "That's all I'm asking." She nodded once. "Then pick a place." He didn't smile. He just walked to his desk, picked up his phone, and said, "Tell the chef to prepare the rooftop." Kiera blinked. "You have a rooftop?" "I have 4, she exhaled, half laughing despite herself. "Of course you do." He looked at her, something unreadable in his gaze. "But this one's for you." Kiera stepped onto the rooftop and forgot how to breathe. It wasn't just a terrace, it was a garden suspended in the sky. Lanterns hung from wrought iron arcs, casting a golden glow over ivy-lined walls. A long table stretched out beneath a canopy of white blossoms, the petals catching the last light of the setting sun. Beyond it, the city glittered like it had been built just for this moment. Iver stood at the far end, speaking to a chef arranging tiny plates on a marble counter. He turned when he noticed her, his expression unreadable, but there was something softer in the way his gaze moved over her. Not possessive, not performative, almost reverent. "You found it," he said, walking toward her. "You didn't mention it was a rooftop garden," she replied, taking in the citrus trees and the scent of rosemary on the breeze. "You didn't ask." She gave a half laugh, then looked back at the skyline. "This doesn't feel real." "It is," he said. "I just don't use it often, didn't have a reason to." Kiera glanced at the table set for 2. No servers hovering, no crowd, just space and silence. And him. He pulled out a chair and she sat without a word. The first course arrived, delicate and unfamiliar. She didn't recognize half of it, but she didn't ask. Her fingers tightened around the silverware as she glanced at him. "This isn't what I expected," she said. He tilted his head slightly. "What did you expect? Something curated, shiny, calculated?" Iver leaned forward. "I didn't want curated. I wanted honest." Kiera lifted her chin. "Then be honest, what is this to you?" His jaw flexed. "I'm not used to explaining myself." "Try." He placed his fork down slowly. "I've built most of my life on strategy, acquisitions, forecasts. But none of that prepared me for someone who could disarm me with a single look." She blinked, but didn't interrupt. "I didn't come back to your farm because I needed to buy land. I came back because I couldn't stop wondering what you'd say if I showed up again." Kiera's fingers curled under the table. "So this is an experiment?" "No," he said, voice low. "This is me asking for a moment that isn't transactional." She studied him, the way his posture had shifted, less composed, more exposed. It was the first time he looked like someone who didn't have control over the outcome. "I've never felt invisible before," he added. "But you didn't care who I was, that mattered." Kiera looked down at her plate. "It's hard to care about titles when your tractor breaks twice in 1 week." He gave a quiet laugh, then stilled. "You miss it?" "I do." "Then let me show you something." Before she could answer, he stood and held out his hand. She hesitated, then took it. They crossed the rooftop, the city stretching endlessly beneath them. Iver led her to a smaller terrace tucked behind a wall of glass. Inside, under soft lighting, was a single easel with a canvas surrounded by scattered sketches and blueprints. She looked between them and him. "This doesn't look like your usual kind of business." "It's not," he said. "This is the part I don't show anyone." She stepped closer, examining the sketch on the table. A barn. Her barn. But surrounded by a modern structure, arched glass, solar panels, and a windmill at its side. "You drew this." "I had help with the renderings." "But the design is mine." Kiera turned to him. Why? Because I wanted to build something that mattered to someone who doesn't care about markets or margins, something that could last. She stared at the paper again. You're designing a farm, I'm designing your farm with your name on it. If you want it. I didn't ask for this, she said quietly. I know, he replied. It's not a proposal, it's a possibility. Kiera glanced out at the skyline again, overwhelmed but not in the way she expected. You think you can just show up in someone's life and redesign it? No, he said. I think I can offer something, and pray you don't walk away. There was no flattery in his voice, no charm, just vulnerability. I need time, she said finally. I'll give you all of it. The next morning, he didn't try to make her stay. He met her at the car, handed her a thermos of coffee, and told her the driver would take her back to the jet when she was ready. He didn't kiss her goodbye. She boarded the plane in silence, watching the city fall beneath her again, this time with something heavier in her chest. Back home, the wind smelled like hay and rain. The barn creaked the same. Her boots found the same grooves in the dirt, but Kiera moved through it all differently, like something inside her had been shifted, cracked open. The next day a package arrived, no note, just a small wooden box. Inside it, wrapped in velvet, was a compass, not a modern one, an antique, weathered brass with a cracked face, but it still pointed north. She turned it over, etched beneath the lid. Wherever this points, I'll follow. She closed it slowly, heart racing. He hadn't asked for an answer. But he'd made it impossible not to give him one. Kiera stood at the entrance of the gallery, her palms slightly damp as she scanned the interior. The space was unlike anything she'd seen before, industrial bones softened by warm lighting and hanging art installations that moved gently with the air. The scent of cedar wood and aged books lingered faintly. It wasn't her world, but it wasn't entirely foreign either. She hadn't told Iver she was coming. The invitation had arrived 2 weeks ago, delivered in person by a courier. A single card embossed with her name and the coordinates of a new exhibit opening. No explanation, no pressure, just a quiet, undeniable gesture. Now she was here, and Iver was waiting. Alone by a tall sculpture of twisted iron and glass, his hands clasped behind his back, his profile still and unreadable. He turned when he sensed her presence, expression shifting so subtly it might have been missed by anyone else, but she caught it. You came, he said quietly. I didn't know if I would, Kiera replied, stepping closer, but I kept thinking about that compass, he nodded. I meant it. Her gaze flicked to the sculpture beside him. Is this yours? It's ours, he said. I commissioned it after the rooftop. It's called Interruption. Kiera touched the edge of the piece, cool metal beneath her fingers. You think I interrupted your life? You didn't just interrupt it, he said. You redefined it. She looked up at him, heart pounding. I don't know how to exist in your world. Then let's make a new one, Iver said. Somewhere in between. I don't know what that looks like. He stepped forward, his voice low and steady. Neither do I, but I know I don't want to find out without you, she hesitated. You're asking me to leave everything I know. I'm asking you to take what you know and bring it with you, he said. Your roots, your fire, your grit. I don't want to change you, Kiera. I want to stand beside you. She searched his face, looking for any trace of performance. There was none. Just the kind of quiet certainty that couldn't be faked. I don't want to be swallowed whole, she said. You never could be, he replied. You'd break the walls down from the inside. A slow smile tugged at her lips. You really believe that? I've seen it. She turned her attention back to the sculpture. What happens when it gets hard? Then we fight, Iver said, not with each other but for each other. Kiera exhaled slowly. I need to still be who I am. Then I'll protect that part of you like it's mine. She felt her defenses fracture, not collapse, but shift, like the moment before a river changes course. Are you going to kiss me here? She asked suddenly, her voice quieter. He stepped closer, leaving no space between them. Only if you want me to. She tilted her face up, heartbeat loud in her ears. I do. The kiss was not hesitant. It was deliberate and grounding. No fireworks, no cinematic spin. Just two people finding the same rhythm after walking different paths. When they broke apart, neither of them spoke for a moment. Kiera finally whispered, "This still doesn't feel real." He took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "Then let's build something too real to question." They walked through the gallery together, hand in hand. As they turned a corner, she noticed a new installation, a row of framed photographs mounted on a brushed steel wall. In the center, a picture of her family's barn taken from above. The hayfield stretched around it in soft golden arcs, the sun casting long shadows over the roof. She stopped. "You had someone take this?" "I did," he said. "The day I left. I wanted to remember what it felt like to land somewhere and not want to leave." Kiera stared at the photo, her throat tightening. "You're not going to let me disappear, are you? Not if I have to chase you to the ends of the earth." She turned to him, her voice suddenly clear. "Then let's stop running." That evening, the gallery transformed. Music began to echo softly through the vaulted space, and guests arrived, friends, colleagues, artists, all unaware that something had shifted in the air. Iver introduced her as his partner, not his girlfriend, not a guest. His partner. The word settled in her chest like an anchor. Later, as the crowd thinned, he guided her to a quiet corner where the lights dimmed and the clinking of glasses faded. "I've been thinking," he said. "Dangerous," she teased. He grinned faintly. "I want to open something new. Somewhere rural, a retreat center, workshops, a place where people disconnect from all this," he gestured around them, "and remember how to breathe." Kiera blinked. "You're serious?" "I want you to run it with me, design it with me, build it." She stared at him, stunned. "You want to leave the city?" "I want to follow where the compass points," he said, "and it keeps pointing to you." Tears welled in her eyes before she could stop them, not from sadness, not even from joy, but from the sheer weight of being seen. "I don't know what to say to that," she whispered. "Then say yes." She stepped into him, her arms wrapping around his waist. Yes. They didn't need anything else. Months later, a new structure rose on the edge of a forested ridge, glass, wood, and open sky. People came from across the country to learn, rest, reconnect. And at the heart of it all was a woman with dirt on her boots and fire in her soul, and the man who had once fallen from the sky into her field like fate itself. They didn't measure love in grand declarations after that. They measured it in the quiet moments, the ones where they stood on the porch of the life they built, watching the sun rise, his hand always finding hers, and the compass, it sat on the mantel, pointing north. But they both knew the real direction it had always followed was each other. The wind carried the scent of cut pine and wood smoke as Kiera stepped out of the cabin, brushing sawdust from the collar of her flannel shirt. Across the clearing, Iver stood on scaffolding, hammer in hand, sleeves pushed to his elbows, hair tousled from the afternoon breeze. He was laughing at something Dean said her brother had come up for the week to help raise the last beam of the retreat lodge, and the sound rolled across the valley like sunlight. Kiera leaned against the porch post, letting herself watch him for a moment. He traded his tailored suits for worn jeans and boots without hesitation, and somehow it suited him better than anything else she'd seen him wear. He looked like he belonged here now, as if he'd never existed anywhere else. She walked down the steps, her boots finding the dirt path naturally. Iver saw her coming, wiped his hands on an old rag, and climbed down. The moment he reached her, his hand found the back of her neck, warm and familiar. "Inspections passed," he said, brushing a thumb over her jaw. "We're cleared to open the east cottages by next week." She smiled. "The last furniture shipment came in this morning. I unpacked the linens myself." "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to," she said. "If we're going to build something with our name on it, I want my fingerprints on every piece." He leaned in until their foreheads touched. "You keep saying things that make me fall harder." Her pulse fluttered, but she kept her voice steady. "We've still got a lot to do. The greenhouse needs the irrigation lines checked, and the sign out front is still leaning. I'll fix the sign tonight. I know you will." They stood there in silence, the hush of the forest settling around them. Then Iver pulled back, his eyes tracing her face with a new kind of intensity. "There's something I want to ask you," he said. Kiera raised an eyebrow. You're not going to suggest another expansion already, are you? He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded slip of paper. Not a ring box, not a dramatic announcement, just a single sheet. She opened it. It was a land deed. Her heart stopped. This is the ridge behind the cabins, she said slowly, reading the coordinates. It borders your family's land, he said. I bought it last month. You once told me you never wanted to be swallowed by someone else's world. So I thought we'd grow ours. You didn't tell me. I wanted it to be a surprise, but not a secret. He paused. We'll build a house there, just ours, no guests, no staff, just windows and quiet and sunrises. Her throat tightened. You think of everything. He took her hands. No, I just think of you. Kiera looked down at the deed, then back at him. You know, I never really believed in permanence, not until you landed in my field. It wasn't the landing, he said. It was what I found when I stepped out. She let out a quiet laugh, one hand lifting to brush his jaw. You always say the right thing. Only with you, he whispered. The following week, they hosted the first retreat guests. Couples arrived from all over, burned-out professionals, young families, artists in search of quiet. Kiera led the sunrise walks through the trails. Iver organized evening fireside panels with guest speakers, and neither of them missed a single shared dinner. At night, they returned to the small cottage they'd claimed for themselves, tucked away from the main grounds. It was nothing extravagant, just timber walls, a stone fireplace, and a view of the stars, but to them, it felt like everything. One night, as the last embers crackled low and Kiera leaned into Iver's side, he shifted and reached behind the couch cushions. She frowned, curious, until he pulled out a small velvet box. You've had that there all night. I've had it for 2 months, he said. I was waiting for the moment that felt the most like us. She sat up slowly, her breath catching. He opened the box. The ring inside was simple white gold, a small diamond flanked by 2 tiny sapphires. Not flashy, not loud, just quiet promise. I don't want a wedding in a ballroom, he said. I don't want matching place cards or a guest list we don't recognize. I want vows under an open sky. I want you in boots that are already muddy. I want the life we've already started, just with your hand wearing this. Kiera stared at the ring, then at him. You really think I'd say no? I think you don't do anything that isn't real. And I wanted this to be the most real thing I've ever done. She reached out, took the ring, and slid it onto her finger herself. Then consider it done. They married 3 weeks later. It was just her family, a few close friends from the retreat, and Iver's mentor, a quiet man with kind eyes who gave her a knowing nod when he walked her to the clearing where Iver waited. The ceremony was held beneath the ridge, with wildflowers blooming around them and the wind rustling through the trees like it was offering its own blessing. When Iver said, I do, he didn't just say it to her. He said it to the life they'd built side by side. To every early morning, every late night, every disagreement that made them stronger. Kiera didn't promise to obey. She promised to challenge, to protect, and to keep pushing until they both grew into the kind of people they wanted to love. Afterward, they danced in the field where he'd once landed, the same field where everything had begun. Dean lit sparklers, her father played old fiddle tunes, and the stars blinked overhead like they were watching something sacred unfold. Years passed. The retreat flourished. They opened a second location on the coast. Iver published a book, unexpectedly, about purpose and risk and love. Kiera taught workshops on sustainable farming and soil restoration. She never stopped wearing boots. He never stopped wearing that quiet look of awe when he watched her speak. They still fought. They still disagreed. But they never walked away. On their 10th anniversary, they stood together on the porch of the house they'd built on the ridge, the deed from that day now framed in the hallway. Iver held her hand, thumb brushing her knuckles the way he always did when he was thinking. You know, he said, I never told you what I thought when I first saw you storming toward my helicopter. She leaned her head against his shoulder. What? I thought, that woman is going to be the beginning of everything. Kiera smiled, then tilted her face up to his. You were right.